Hello everyone, Thomas from Medieval Review here, and I wanted to give my kind of closing thoughts on DragonCon. DragonCon essentially took up the entire month of September for me, what with producing a lot of the videos coming out of that weekend, as well as doing some things behind the scenes. Certainly, I'm going to get back in the swing of things here shortly, but I really wanted to speak to DragonCon and some of the things I'm seeing kind of coming out of that and the response to some of the videos. So, first, I'm just going to talk a little bit about DragonCon itself, my experience there, being a presenter, as well as just someone who's kind of working with the Armory track as best I could. I really wanted to just help them out. I actually spent a lot of my time down there just hanging out with the guys, getting to know them all a little bit better, having met them in previous years, but interacting with them more online and getting to meet them in person on such a busy weekend is just an opportunity to get to know them better. It was a fantastic weekend from my perspective. I really enjoyed being in the Armory. I kind of got to just stand around and answer some questions. Obviously, some of my swords were on display, and it was awesome to be able to answer questions about those. And just in general, hanging out with the people who have an interest or even a burgeoning interest in kind of ancient weapons or medieval weapons, and they were going down there to take a look at them. So many people who have very, very basic, if no understanding of the weapons that we had on display and some of the concepts behind them. So it was really cool just to be able to talk to them about these things. It was also really cool to have the opportunity to meet a couple of viewers. There's only a couple, I think about 3 or 4 that actually recognized me from the channel, but it's still awesome. Great chance to meet them and just say hello and get to talk to them a bit. It's very hectic, and that's unfortunate, and I definitely didn't get enough time to just kind of spend with people to talk to them, but I try to do my best, and I really do appreciate those who came up and said hello. And my panels went, I feel, extremely well. The rooms were actually packed out. We essentially got everyone seated for the one presentation. Sometimes if it's too many people, we have to kind of break it up into smaller chunks. And honestly, my topics, I was really worried about that because I really wanted to be able to cover them in enough detail to get people interested in what I was talking about, but not have to rush it. And so we managed to get everyone packed in this honestly very tiny room. And it was great, though. It worked out really well. I feel like the presentations went very well. I certainly enjoyed giving them, and I'll have some notes on my presentations here in a moment. And then going and filming a lot of the stuff that was happening. I did my best to not repeat things that I'd seen in previous years. So a good example of that is they had a women in kind of HEMA and sport armored combat. I forgot what the actual title of it was, but they had this kind of awesome, women can fight too moment, and I actually recorded that in previous years or last year, and it was actually extremely positive. A lot of there was some odd reactions from a certain subsection of the internet trolls, but I think for the most part it's a positive reception. And they did that again this year. From all accounts, it was actually really awesome this year, a whole lot better than it was actually the year before. And while I didn't record that because I didn't want to just kind of repeat what I'd already done, it was certainly apparently a very positive thing. And I felt like the things I did record instead were actually that much better, honestly. So one of the ones that we did was it was titled "How the Sword Saved My Life," and just from the comments I've seen in that video thus far, it's actually been a very positive reception as well, which is great. It's exactly what it's supposed to be, a positive outlook on the things we do. Whether it's HEMA or those people who do armored combat fighting. So really interesting, good panels all around. I enjoyed a lot of them. There were some that I just didn't get around to recording. There was no way to get everything done. I certainly had some on my docket that I planned on recording, and then that kind of backfired in the weirdest possible way. I'll get to that in a moment. But I do want to speak for a moment to some of the reactions that people have been having, especially to some of the tournament fighting. So I can't speak a lot to the armored combat fighting. It's not the thing I do. It's more of a sport fighting. I'm more interested in the martial arts side. There are certain things they do that are designed not just for the fun of it, but also for the show of it. So that that can have some odd impacts to people who are looking for something extremely traditional. And on top of all that, because it's a limited tournament, it has to happen, just within a couple of hours, and they're trying to rush things along. It's not exactly like the most accurate tournament in the world. The focus is on bringing people, getting butts in seat, as it were, but not necessarily getting people to stay all day and watch a tournament. And so because of that, we end up with some odd scoring methodologies, or some more rapid scoring methodologies, and maybe a little bit more hand waviness than would actually be traditionally done in a tournament. But for the Armored Combat guys, they have their own rule set. I actually mentioned it in one of my panels when I was talking about it. You don't thrust in it, and so when you remove a thrust from Armored Combat, you begin to actually kind of toss out half, if not more, of what you would actually do in a fight against an armored opponent. Some things are, quasi-anachronistic. They really try to focus, the Armored Combat guys specifically try to focus on historical accuracy with the armor, and they have some things they do with that. And because of cost of armor, a lot of times their armor is not kind of the traditional European armor that we're all very used to seeing. They pull from like Mongolian or Russian armor designs, and that helps to defray some of the costs. And some people are actually building armor kits that are very munitions grade and aren't necessarily always meeting all the exact standards of kind of historical accuracy, but that's to get them out there and fighting. And I don't think that anyone that participates in that has kind of any misconceptions within themselves and within what they do about the accuracies there within. They understand there are some anachronisms, just like people in HEMA understand there are some anachronisms in what we do. And they recognize that, and honestly, they're out there to have fun. And I think it's a good thing that people want to have fun and do so in a medieval style. And I've talked before, a long time ago, about my thoughts on something like Battle of Nations or the SCA and HEMA, and kind of where I would stack rank them in terms of historical accuracy. But lack of historical accuracy doesn't mean that we should just suddenly dump a bunch of criticism on a group that is really just out there having fun. I don't view it as particularly beneficial to go dump on Battle of Nations or dump on the SCA. It's not the right thing to do. I think having informed and very civil discussions about what is historically accurate and what isn't, and why we choose one over the other, is actually a perfectly valid thing to do. Again, fighting in HEMA wearing a bunch of padded stuff and a mask is not historically accurate. So, well, we've just lost there, but we do it because of safety reasons. So there are things that we do as concessions that are meant to kind of help define lines for these things. And certainly when you look at some of the people who are fighting in the Battle of Nations stuff, their focus is on knocking someone down or scoring a bunch of points under a Bohurt rule. And that's perfectly fine. There are things they do for that, and there are techniques they use. They aren't necessarily what I would, again, call martially valid, because that's not really the point. Their point is to score points or to knock someone over. Certain things you don't do when you're just trying to do that. And there are obviously some things that benefit a person who's fighting that may not be martially valid, in that it might actually get you killed in a real fight, but in Battle of Nations fight, anything goes. And that's why they call it sport combat. Right? They're not calling it historical recreation. That's really important. I think that distinction is important. And I used to have a lot more criticisms for them in the past, and in talking to the guys and dealing with them, and them talking to me, I have a lot less criticisms, because they recognize these things. They're open about it. They're willing to talk about it, but they aren't willing to talk with people who are just going to blast, obscenities at them or whatever. As far as the HEMA tournament goes, it was actually run out of one of the local clubs, Atlanta Freifechter. One of their students is the guy who won at Long Point this year, won the longsword tournament. They know how to fight in historical European methods. A lot of the criticism there was just saying there's a lot of lack of technique and all that. A lot of this was actually tied to some of the constraints we actually had within the grand ballroom where this tournament was happening. they were very restricted in their space. I think it was something like not even 15 feet across in that cage. And it's kind of a little bit hard to tell in that video. It looks a lot bigger on the video than it is. It's kind of almost like a weird fisheye effect that I didn't really consider in camera so much, but in person, it's actually a very small cage. And that makes it really hard, especially for German longsword fighters who like to get in, hit, and get out. It's actually one of the reasons that one of the Italian longsword fighters was honestly in a lot of ways dominating a lot of things, because they're very good at getting in up close and personal, which is awesome, and you get to see that a little bit. But also a lot of people looked at the rules and the tournament scoring, and they were kind of doing some internal brain checks, and they were like, none of this makes sense, and this isn't right, and all this scoring is wrong. And well, we weren't using like, you know, long point rule sets for the tournaments. We're actually using a completely different rule set. And this rule set was designed to actually allow there to really only be 2 judges, one in the ring refereeing as well. I think it was the best we could do given the situation we were in. And I say we as a general, like, HEMA people who were at Long Point. I wasn't really involved in it besides recording it. And I will say that all criticisms are fair criticisms as long as they are informed criticisms. So, you know, go research up on some of the rule sets, go watch the videos for yourself, make your own decisions. There was just a lot of things we had to make as kind of, you know, a consolation, as it were. And in doing so, it can look a little bit weird. It cannot function as well as we want it to. But again, the purpose was to get butts in seats, get people engaged in watching it, and hopefully get them interested in doing HEMA, which is something that actually kind of happened. There's some really cool moments. So one of the things I didn't really record, there was a foam tournament. It was actually meant to get participants in the convention itself to come in and actually fight in a safe manner. They gave them some kind of like karate headgear, and they had big like LARPing foam swords and big foam shields, and they got to go at it. And, you know, they're very unskilled, right? There were so many people who were wanting to get involved in that, but there was like a pre-registration thing, and some people didn't know that, so they just showed up. We decided to actually kind of informally create off to the side a little kind of day one introductory how to fight with a sword thing, and it was basically run under the HEMA mindset. So we got a bunch of people who were doing, you know, either training or teaching historical European martial arts, myself included. I happened to be there, and I was like, I'll jump in and help. And we each got like teams of 4 people. We got them swords. They weren't the best swords because what we had on hand was mostly the blunt training swords that were used for the Battle Nation stuff. And that those armored combat swords are a little bit, they're a lot heavier and a lot more overbuilt than they would normally be because of the abuse that those guys put them through. So we kind of had to let people know this isn't quite accurate for, like, you know, good proper swords, but it'll do, and we'll teach you some stuff. We taught them some basics, and it's really positive. In fact, we got to see a lot of those people over the next couple days at the at the armory, showing up for things because of their interest in it, which is really awesome. And getting the message out there. We had a lot of people coming up and asking, where can I find clubs to go do this? Awesome. And this is people all over the United States, and even some people all over the globe. I actually met a guy who's from London, and he was like, this is awesome. How can I learn about it? And I was like, well, let me tell you about this guy named Matt Easton. Yeah, it's like, you know, he's right there. He's right there, and a great place to be to learn historical European martial arts. I was like, you just got to go home and go contact Matt and go join his club, because that'll be awesome. So it's a really cool opportunity to just kind of get out there and get to know people. Some of the things that I did just kind of outside of the kind of armory room, obviously I did the panels. I actually had one surprise panel. I'd actually planned on recording it. The panel title was Ancient Weapons. There was no real description for it, so I was like, okay, it could be pretty much anything. And so I set aside time to go record it. And, well, there was apparently not someone there to actually handle that session. Either they forgot to get someone, or I think more likely someone had to bail out at the last second, and it didn't get canceled within like the app, so people were showing up. And they came walking around the armory real scared. The organizer was like, who knows anything about ancient weapons? And, I mean, I'm not going to say I'm an expert in ancient weapons by any stretch of the imagination, but most of the people in the armory had a real strong focus on the medieval period and nothing outside of it. And so I got co-opted into doing a panel I wasn't expecting. I had about 30 seconds to prepare for it. I had zero props or zero things I could kind of bring in there to help further the discussion. We walked around the armory and we found a khopesh, an Egyptian sword, and we found a box of, kind of napped spearheads and arrowheads made out of various stones and minerals. So we grabbed that. And we went there. I think we also found kind of a reproduction Bronze Age Celtic-ish sword. Not very historically accurate, and it was actually just steel that had a anodized covering to it, plating to make it kind of look bronze. It was way too heavy, but we grabbed those things. We went, and myself and one other person, we sat down and we gave an hour-long presentation on ancient weapons. It was honestly kind of tough to do. I benefited a little bit from the research I had done on my swords of Arslan Tepe. By the way, I got that pronounced right this time, Arslan Tepe. I've been corrected on that. And so I had a little bit of benefit of that and talking about some of the Bronze Age molding. I also talked, kind of prehistory and the methods of napping stones, for example, or glass to get a sharp edge, to make spears, to make arrowheads. Talked a lot about how spears were the primary weapons. Swords didn't really come into the thing till much later. And we basically took them from Stone Age to roughly, I'm going to say, kind of mid-Iron Age. We really kind of stopped at High Roman period because at that point most people are aware, and we kind of said, we could still call it ancient weapons, but I don't really, let's go super ancient just to be safe. I also talked about some of the concepts of being able to see ancient weaponry kind of more apparent in societies that have been removed from Western civilization, such as Native American societies, where certainly much more recent when they were being recent on a global time scale, when colonization was happening, they were using arrowheads made of stone and et cetera, et cetera. So talk a little about how you can kind of see these things, technologies that are actually roughly similar all over the globe. It was interesting. It was challenging to be able to do an hour-long presentation. It was really more like a 40-minute presentation with 20-minute questions, but it's hard to do that at a drop of a hat. I much prefer being prepared. But that was interesting. And then, of course, I got to do my two presentations. The sword, evolution of the medieval sword presentation, I feel like probably went the best because it was the most easily understood by the audience. And I think it's probably the more entertaining one. It's a lot easier to crack jokes about just general medieval things than it is about the physics of a sword. So being able to engage with people a lot more, have conversations, keep it very, very surface level was, I think, a good thing. And I certainly filled up all the time. We basically ran overtime with that panel. There were some criticisms in the comments of the video. I wouldn't have expected anything less. About kind of the accuracy of some of the statements. Great, fine. I give my kind of bog standard answer for that. When you're talking at a very high level, you end up having to generalize to cover a topic in a broad sense and not go down a rabbit hole of detail, and to keep people engaged and keep people at a high level and interested in knowing more so they can go do their own research. You have to generalize. And in the process of generalization, you are going to lose some facts. You're going to say things that aren't 100%. And you can't stop everything every single time you're going to make that 99% factual statement and say, but there's this one thing and let me talk about it for 10 minutes. So you generalize and you just breeze by and you just go. And obviously for people who are really interested in this, who might be watching that video on this channel, haven't been posted, they're like, oh, all these things are wrong, it's terrible. You're not really the audience for that talk, right? The audience for that talk is someone who knows absolutely nothing. At the very least, we want to be able to bust some of the really basic myths that people have and then get on to the main subject and get people at least informed enough to go do their own research or whatever. I will say, in general, criticism again, criticism is great. Informed criticism is better. Everyone has the right to criticize. Everyone has the right to be heard in their criticism. I actually, even though I don't respond to every piece of criticism that comes in my comments, just like I don't respond to every comment these days, I do value it, and I don't mind the criticism. My request would always be, and I actually pinned this as a comment or a comment thread under one of the videos, that when you have criticism, be very specific, so I know what you would like to have better or what I did wrong, so I can try to fix it. I can't always fix it, but I can try my best. And if I certainly got something completely wrong, I was completely erroneous, great, I'll fix that too. I'll learn, right? I'm not infallible. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I am a very, very passionate hobbyist, right? And so criticism is great. Please give me constructive criticism, because if it's not constructive, I'm going to read it and then promptly ignore it because it's not constructive, and I don't have time to chase after trying to figure out an answer for that. Sword Dynamics went really well as well, although there's a lot more stunned faces in that one. I don't really know what people expected for that talk. The talk was actually more or less requested by the people who are actually running that particular half of the armory track, the kind of weapons and medieval side of the track, because they were interested in it and they figured there'd be a pretty big interest, and there was a lot of people who showed up there. We try to engage them on various levels, talking about video games a bit and all that, but it's very hard to do that. But overall, I think the panels went really well. I really enjoyed giving them. I like public speaking a lot. I like being able to teach people. So I'm always going to look for opportunities to do that again. And I hope that I get to do it again at DragonCon at some point in the future. Really, really good time overall. So I think DragonCon was really a success from a lot of perspectives. There's a lot of things that can be done better, as always. There's a lot of things I can do better, as always. But I think it was an opportunity to get a vast majority of people who have little or no interest in the Middle Ages or weaponry or these things that we all have a passion for, and get them a little bit more involved and say, check this out, this is actually really cool, and then kind of their eyes brighten and they go, oh, this is really awesome. Oh man, you guys actually fight with this stuff, and it's not just silly stage fighting, like you actually can do that. Oh, I watched it happen, that's really cool. That's awesome, that's what we want. So hopefully we'll get more of this kind of buzz and excitement generated through some of these other interesting avenues. But overall, yeah, DragonCon was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I wanted to just kind of give these closing thoughts because I've posted a ton of videos. I think it was like a total of like 11 videos that I worked on. And it was a lot. And going through it and editing for time and content and all that took some time. But I really wanted to have a chance to kind of bookend the entire experience and give my thoughts on the other side of it. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen through this. About to get back to the regularly scheduled program, as it were. Got some reviews in the pipeline. I'm ready to go. A lot of stuff going to happen. It's going to be really cool. So stay tuned, guys. Fun stuff ahead.